What's going down, everybody, and welcome back to the channel. We've got another altered art tutorial, and today we're doing an update on the 3 cards I talked about last time and how I updated them, and I've got a few more tips on how to improve your altars. Now, let's start with these 3. The first one, we've got a Japanese command tower here. I did snow all the way around the bottom. I cleaned up the edges. I added a little bit more snow, a little bit more lightning. It just gives it a little bit nicer, more polished finish. So that's the first one. The second one is the same. I did snow all around the bottom and added really subtle blue and purple here and here to make it look like a snowdrift. You can barely see it on camera. There's another one here. You can barely see it, but it's all there and it's updated, and I think it looks way better. And the final one, we've got the Mox Diamond. Last time I said that there was not enough detail kind of down on this sort of side of it. I added a little bit more whites to the flowers. I added some big flowers here. The more these flowers bloom in real life, the whiter they get. They start off very red at the ends. That's the last place for the nutrients to get in a real tree, is the very ends. And so when I painted it, those are the smallest ones. The biggest ones are the closest to the trunk. That's all these guys. And I think it looks way better. Now, as for my tips today, I've got a few tips that I think are going to help you guys improve your altars even more, and we're going to start off with brushes. Here's a couple brushes that I have, both of which are used. Here, let me move these. Both of these brushes are used, and my first tip is to clean or replace brushes. Now let's start with cleaning. If you don't clean your stuff thoroughly and often, paint can get stuck down close to where the bristles are attached to the actual brush. And when paint gets stuffed in there and hardens in there, it can actually spread the tips out so you don't have a sharp point. So you're not going to get as much out of the brush, and these brushes are $7, $8, $9, $10, and if you're not getting your money's worth out of them, they're not even going to be worth it. So sure, you can clean in water or soapy water, but what I like to do when the paint is tough and dried on like this is I actually like to dip them in acetone, and I use a little brush like this, just another brush that maybe I'm cleaning, and in the acetone I'll just do this, and then I'll wring it out on some paper towel, and I'll do this, and eventually this will get fairly clean. Acetone's available at most hardware stores like Lowe's or Home Depot or whatever for a few bucks. The only thing you'll have to watch out is this kind of baked on whatever this is coating, or if you have a plastic brush like this, the acetone can eat it. Acetone will eat some forms of plastic and almost all of this kind of stuff. So limit your acetone dipping to just the end of your brush. Now, as far as replacing brushes go, if a brush is too far gone, or if the tips of the actual bristles are just not the right shape anymore, you won't be able to see really on camera because this brush is so small, but the ends of the bristles actually start to curl a little bit. If that's happening, you're not going to get as fine of a point. You're not going to get as much out of the brush that you would if you had a new one. And again, I don't know if you can see, but this is the new one. This is the old one. And the new one has a much finer point. It's way more pronounced when you have a brush like this. This is a number 0 round. This is an old dirty one. This is a new one. It's so new, like the bristles are so white you can't even see them. But there's the 2 differences in tips. The new one is longer, it's a sharper point, it's going to be far more effective. The third one I've got here is my blending brush. Here's an old one. This is the one that I would use to clean with acetone. Here's a new one. And I went over this in one of the intro tutorials where I talk about brushes and supplies. But this is what I use for blending. I'll mix my paint and then I'll do circles like this on the brush. And the pigment in the paint is actually quite coarse microscopically. And over time, it's going to wear down the bristles of your brush. Over time, this is the same brush. Over time, it's going to get worn down, and you do have to replace it because the shorter that they get, the stiffer they get, and the more paint is going to get jammed up close to where they're all bound together, and it's going to get more difficult to use. Now, Brushes like this, they do have a benefit. They do have a use. You can actually mix paint with them and then do this kind of thing with them. And this is going to give you a nice spreading paint effect. And it's actually going to be better for coverage when you dab paint like this than when you paint it like this. So when you're using light colors, I find it better to use a brush like this to get the coverage. The only thing you'll have to make sure of is that the paint doesn't get too thick or look like it's blotted on. So just be careful of that. So that covers cleaning or replacing, painting. The last thing I want to go over today is to have a dabble board or somewhere like this that you can actually get excess paint off of your brush. You dip it in your palette, guaranteed you're going to have too much paint, more paint than what you want, and you can just a little bit get some of it out, even if it's just a little touch or whatever, or sometimes when you're using a little bit of an older brush like this, you could, and you can see some of my stripes here, you could bring the brush to a point like this and align all the fibers so you get a nice smooth edge. This is the kind of thing that you want to do it on. A piece of paper or something that's not going to absorb too much of the paint off of the brush. You can't use a paper towel to do this because a paper towel is going to act like a sponge and suck all the paint out of the brush. Maybe if you're used to painting on canvases or using big brushes where you do want a bunch of paint on the brush all at once, you've never done this, or using paper towel would be okay. But again, paper towel is far too absorbent. And something plastic, like a piece of glass mirror or like on your palette, like how a lot of oil painters do, isn't going to take enough off of the brush. So you do need something like a piece of paper, just computer paper, loose leaf, whatever you have. So those are my 3 tips today. Remember to take your time, finish your altars, replace your brushes if they need, clean them with water and then with acetone if they don't need replacing, and have a dabble board to make sure you're not lumping paint on. Everybody's seen those altars that look really thick, really caked on. We're going to cover that in a future tutorial. Big thanks to all the new subs. Big thanks to all the Patreon supporters. You can find links to the Patreon page in the notes below. Give this video a like, become a new subscriber, level up your altar game, and become part of the best Commander community that there is. See you next time.